Hello, hello, hello. I hope you guys can see me and hear me. Sorry I'm running a little bit late. Still trying to get everything all set up. Because, well, I'm slow. So, here I am. Let's see. Just getting, oh, there's some light. Woo! Okay. There. That's totally horrifying. So I am here today to talk to you guys about the signs, the moon when they're when it's in the signs. There, got it. So, if you've been following me for a little while, you know that I'll often update on Facebook telling you guys what sign the moon is in and sort of what to look at and what to expect when that's happening. So, yeah, here we are. Let's see. Just getting everything set up still. Sorry, I am very slow today. I'm a bit tired, but that's just because I'm always on the go. So, there. I think I've got it. All right. Looks like I've got it. All right, cool. Here we go. So just give me a thumbs up if you're watching, if you're ready, and we'll get started with some really good information about the moon and how it affects us when it's in the different signs of the zodiac. So I'll just kind of start off by saying my name is Alysa, and I'm known as the North Star Mystic. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader. I live here in beautiful southern Ontario in Canada, where it's been alternatingly hellishly hot and cold. Today was pretty chilly. And yeah, so what do? I do all kinds of stuff, including birth charts and synastry charts. That's kind of looking at how we get along inside of our most intimate relationships. Let's see, what else do I do? I do tarot reading. I think I mentioned that. I'm a published artist. I have 2 decks under my belt, both the Syrian Starseed Tarot as well as the Seeker's Oracle. Both really well-received decks, and they've been a lot of fun to use and a lot of fun to create. But my passion, or one of my passions, is astrology. I absolutely love astrology. And our friend Nikki Borg, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Nikki, asked me to come on here and visit with you guys live tonight and talk a little bit about how the moon affects us when it's going through the different signs. So a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight will be pretty general stuff. We won't be able to get into the nitty-gritty stuff because then we would have to go into your specific natal chart and see how the moon is affecting you and what your moon sign is and where that lands inside your natal chart. So we'll start off, I guess, just by sort of talking about how this whole thing works. So if you're familiar at all with astrology, you'll know that we each have a sun sign, and we also have additionally a moon sign and an ascendant, which are very commonly talked about. A lot of people know all about those things. But also we have the rest of the planets, and they kind of land in different places around the chart. And so that sort of translates into a lot about how, we sort of, the influences we operate under. So I always tell people it's not exactly what you would call a rule per se, but it is sort of like a guidepost. It will sort of help you to understand yourself in a deeper, more holistic way. There we go again with English. Astrology will help you to understand yourself in a deeper and more holistic way. And that's why I fell in love with it myself, is because, there's a little message here. It says something weird I've never seen before. I guess I can bring somebody on camera? Oh, I can, to join my broadcast. Let's see how that works. Facebook is, I guess, adding new things all the time, but I didn't know that, so it's distracting me. Not that that's terribly difficult. I'm often distracted. But anyway, so I'll get more to the point. So, as it stands, most of us really enjoy using astrology. for all kinds of different things in our lives. And each of the planets, and specifically the moon, will certainly show up in different ways in your life. Like, you'll really notice the moon signs, or the moon in the signs throughout the month. So how that works is we have, as you know, a really awesome solar system where, you know, there's a whole bunch of planets kind of floating around the sun doing their thing. And each one of those planets has a sign that's associated with. And so there's an energy that sort of accompanies the sign and the planet, and they all sort of work together in sometimes harmonious ways and sometimes less so. So when we're talking about where and what sign the moon is in, that tells us where in the sky, or at least relative to Earth anyway, what constellation the moon is traveling through. So much like we're heading into Virgo season right now. Actually, we should be right in Virgo season, right at the first decant of Virgo. So that happens that astronomically speaking, the Earth is actually starting to travel through the space of the heavens that the constellation Virgo occupies. So the moon does that in the same way, except for it does it a lot faster, as opposed to doing it for over a period of 22 to 21, 22 days. It does it in a matter of 2.5 days, give or take, that it'll travel through each sign in the zodiac. So each sign in the zodiac will have a visit from the moon inside of a month. So we'll see each sign starting with Aries and ending with Pisces all throughout the month. And so I like to give you guys updates to sort of let you know what to expect energetically, because, you know, I'm sure we've all sat there and thought to ourselves, like, what the hell is actually going on? Like, everything's weird, nobody's getting along, or, you know, other times when you're feeling like really energetic and really good, you know, we can look at astrology and say that in some respects that actually influences our experiences on Earth as human beings. So as you might be able to agree, you know, we can see the effects physically on the planet. With the moon, our tides change. As women, we all know exactly what that's like. Our physical tides change. You know, our menstrual cycle is synced up in some fashion or another to the the cycles of the moon. So I'll just talk a little bit about each sign and some of the common experiences that people tend to have when the moon is in each sign. So if you're not familiar with the natural order of the zodiac, it starts with Aries. And Aries is a very interesting energy. In fact, they're all interesting in their own way, but Aries is a very how shall we put it? It's a very speedy, kind of excitable energy. Sometimes it can be a little bit aggressive too. It can also be, let's see, I'm just going to grab my handy dandy little notebook that I keep all of my astrological notes in. That will help me stay on track, you know, because I think I mentioned I have a tendency to squirrel out a lot, you know. Let's see here. Let's get to Aries. So Aries, if you know any Aries folks, you'll probably know that they're pretty intense personalities. Not necessarily in a bad way, but they're intense from the standpoint that they're very physically active. They're very outwardly projecting their personality. Like if you know an Aries in your life, then you will know what I'm talking about. They tend to be very, kind of I am oriented is probably the best way to put it. Let's see, what do we have here? Got a message. So, sorry about that, a little bit of a distraction there, but the way that Aries energy tends to play out when the moon is visiting through Aries is that we tend to feel that as being sort of a little bit more of an aggressive energy, like we want to get out there and do things, and sometimes it can be confrontational, and sometimes it can be just very initiative, and like you just want to get stuff done, you want to get out there and be physical and active and doing things. So you know, when you see that the moon is in the sign of Aries, that's kind of what you can expect. I know a lot of people tend to feel like that energy is, well, warlike. Like people really want to kind of, they're aggressive and they really want to, get into all kinds of different things. I don't know if it's so much like arguments, or they tend, people can tend to be a little bit crankier than usual. And sometimes people are just, in generally wanting to, get out and do a lot of different stuff, and be very pioneering is a good word for it. Now, as that kind of phases out into Taurus, you will see that people are starting to kind of mellow out a little bit. Like, people are starting to relax and their attitudes are cooling off. And, so when we are into the Taurus as our moon sign, then people tend to be a little bit more concerned with, sort of more mundane activities. Like they really want to kind of get down to business when it comes to getting down to business. Maybe not as much as Capricorn, but certainly people are concerned with more, foundational kinds of issues. Like people will want to like get into doing some gardening, or they'll want to do things like, sit by the fire and read a book and just sort of relax. I mean, it's more of a steadier emotional energy as opposed to like Aries that's very fiery and ready to go. So, that earth energy of Taurus is really nice because it just kind of tends to wind things down a bit. And then once we get into Gemini, which is the third sign of the zodiac, now we're dealing with air energies. And when the moon and air kind of come together, we tend to be a little bit more thoughtful. We tend to be a little more intellectual. We tend to, our thoughts sort of are directed towards things like, how we communicate with other people and the kinds of mental activities that are surrounding things like learning. And sometimes coming into focus will be things like your relationships with your siblings and how you sort of interact with them, as these are all things that are sort of ruled by Gemini. And Gemini also, as you know, has that dualistic energy. So it kind of, I always think of it not so much as, two sides of the same coin, but it's almost like an opposing forces in a way. It's like, if you've known any Geminis in your life, you will know that on one hand, they sort of will have a side of a personality that you like, and then the other side of the personality, you're like, who exactly are you? So I think Gemini energy, when it comes to being in the moon, tends to be a little bit more like that, because the moon is, again, it rules our emotions. It really sort of operates from that, place within ourselves where, our emotional, okay, sorry. Looks like there's things going on. Oh, I don't even know what the heck this is. Sorry, I'm just a new on my list here. So I don't know if I've done that correctly, but anyways, yeah, so Gemini, it's, oh, sorry, I was on the moon, wasn't I? The moon tends to be, it gets our focus on things of an emotional nature. So we're tending to focus a lot on, how we feel. And then when the moon is in Gemini, that comes across as, sometimes about how we feel when we communicate, or, how our communication makes other people feel. And again, that sort of Gemini energy that has that dualistic nature to it can, sometimes work in our favor and sometimes work against it. And that's really where it's important to observe what sort of activity is going on in terms of aspects. But we'll talk a little bit more about aspects once we get through the signs. So the fourth sign of the zodiac is Cancer. Now, Cancer is incidentally ruled by the moon. So it's kind of like you're getting double moon energies there when the moon visits in the sign of Cancer. And Cancer really loves to sort of help us focus on things like home and parents and our roots and our inner selves and that inner world. And we really want to feel and nurture. And it's very fascinating how that works. So when we are, being under the influence of both the moon and the sign of Cancer, it's again kind of almost like a double dose of that emotional energy. So again, looking at the aspects, and that's why when I do my my little moonling updates, I always let you guys know what the aspects are, because then you can kind of, you know what to expect as the days progress in that particular sign. And then when we're in the fifth house, which is ruled by, or sorry, the fifth sign, which is ruled by Leo, that's when our mood tends to sort of fluctuate towards wanting to have more fun. We want to be a little bit more active with our children, and we want to feel more creative, and we want to do things that, you know, spark romance and other things like that. Because Leo really loves all of those things. Leo's a very bold energy, so our emotions tend to come out in a more, you know, a bold way. And so when we see the moon in Leo, it's a very, I usually find that it's a pretty fun time most of the time. Granted, if there's nasty aspects, of course, that changes everything. So then when the moon travels from Leo into Virgo, some people start to cringe a little bit when they hear me say that, because Virgo is known as being kind of, and I can say this because I am a Virgo, as the shit picker of the zodiac, because that's what Virgo does. Virgo likes to look for, well, inefficiencies. So at this time, I've noticed that our minds tend to wander towards things like health and work and service, and what are we doing for our own improvement, our own self-improvement. And when the moon's in Virgo, you'll probably notice that you start really feeling like you want to focus on things that have to do with your health, with your well-being. And, you know, I always advise when the moon's in Virgo that it's a great time to like sit down and look at, you know, what am I eating? Am I getting outside enough? And the thing is with that energy, though it can sometimes seem a little bit critical, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because, you know, we tend to want to find areas, or that Virgo energy tends to want to find areas where things can be improved. So it's less about shit picking and more about making more efficient use of your time and energy. So then when we get into the seventh sign of the zodiac, which is Libra, Libra is a pretty cool sign because it's really about, again, finding balance, but it's in a slightly different way than Gemini. So with Libra, we're finding balance again through, you know, our relationships and our partnerships. That's where the energy sort of changes, because Libra rules the seventh house, which also has to do with your partnerships, your relationships, your cooperation. And, you know, it's all about that energy that you express when you're with someone else, and vice versa. And it's kind of, you'll notice around this time when the moon hits into Libra, sometimes you're going to kind of find situations where you might be seeing some power struggles inside some of your relationships. And though that can be very frustrating, got to get some water. Again, we want to try to use that energy in a positive way. Of course, who doesn't? But I mean, let's face it, we're all human beings. And at the end of the day, you know, sometimes with the feelings that the moon sort of helps us experience, if we're feeling like there's an imbalance somewhere, it becomes uncomfortable. You know, I mean, that's just the way things seem to work. And so inside of those areas of your relationships, your partnerships, whether it be business or marriage or, you know, just any kind of relationships that you're working with, you know, that's the time that you want to use that emotional energy toward creating more balance. Do it with diplomacy, because Libra really loves diplomacy. Libra is all about, instead of, you know, kind of going and slamming into an issue, Libra is going to sit there and think about it a little bit and then find a good way to sort of say what's on the mind. And then from Libra, we move into the eighth sign of the zodiac, which is Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is a very intense energy, and I know Scorpio gets a lot of crap. So if any of you guys are Scorpios, I'm sure you're nodding going, yeah, I know. But what's interesting about Scorpio moon is then we start feeling the need or the urge for transformation, because that's what Scorpio is all about. Scorpio is the sign of transportation. Well, maybe in a way. No, that's Gemini. But It's that sign of transformation. It's all about, you know, the rebirth of the self. And sometimes it can come at, you know, a lot of different angles, you might say. Scorpio also deals with other people's money or other people's possessions. This is also the sign of inheritance. So sometimes when we are in a Scorpio moon, those kinds of issues might come up for you. You might find that, you know, you're in a position where it's like, well, I have to make changes, and you'll feel this urge, you know, or even compelled to make some major transformations. I keep wanting to say transportations. So, you know, when we're talking about that energy as it concerns the moon, when those two energies sort of mingle and operate together, then what we're looking at again is that feeling that we want to make some major shifts in our lives. And for some people, this might mean, you know, we are getting rid of things that don't serve us anymore. You know, sometimes you lose a job, but then you'll turn around in that same period and find a better one, or at least, you know, one that will get you by until you get the job you want, for example. And so it's kind of a trickier energy, but the thing is to understand about this kind of influence is that it's always working towards your highest good. At the end of the day, I mean, it doesn't feel like it sometimes. Sometimes you're like, okay, universe, I think I've had enough for today. Like, I'm done. But the reality is that even when it is uncomfortable, it is always working for your highest good. And so if we can sort of keep our minds pointed toward how can I make these experiences benefit me or even those around me, then you'll kind of, you know, be able to manage them a little bit better. So from Scorpio, then we go into Sagittarius. Now with Sagittarius energy, a lot of times we feel a little bit more optimistic because Sagittarius is ruled by the planet Jupiter, which is, you know, all about expansion and growth. And, you know, it's a very, what we call benefic planet in astrology. And what Sagittarius likes us to focus on are things like education, higher education. So it's like taking that time to learn things that are a little bit more than just the mundane. So instead of learning how to balance your checkbook, you're going to learn how to, you know, understand philosophies of Socrates or something like that. You know, some, you know, highly intellectual pursuits. It's also, you know, we might be feeling pulled towards things like religion and sometimes long distance travel, because these are all things that are ruled by Sagittarius. So again, it's like we're feeling like we want these things in our lives. We're feeling like, you know, there's different areas that we want to take to the next level. And with Sagittarius, the main thing to remember, it's all about exploration. It's all about growth and expansion. And so that's why when the moon is in that sign, you do sort of feel maybe a little hemmed in. Like, I just want to go out and do stuff. I want to, you know, not be stuck in the monotony of everyday life. And then we kind of travel from that energy into the 10th sign of the zodiac, which is Capricorn. And this is kind of fun because I think our moon's in Capricorn right now. So Capricorn moon is all about really getting down to business with things. It's like getting serious and working on things. So it's a great time. So if you're starting a new business, for example, or if you're starting a new project at work, a Capricorn moon is totally your friend, because this kind of energy is highly supportive of helping you to focus and be very critical about things, and to look at things with a sort of dispassionate eye. Another way to say that is you can just kind of focus on your work and not feel as distracted as you might, like if the moon was, say, in Sagittarius, because then you like just want to go out and play. You're not really interested in doing work. But Capricorn loves to focus on career and status and all things to do with your job or vocation. It's very purpose-driven and purpose-oriented. So when you are using that energy to its best and highest ability, that's the time when you want to sit down and start really planning how you're going to go forward in the areas of your career or job or work. So it's also concerned with things like reputation as well. So sometimes you might want to look at this with a very critical eye and think, okay, yeah, the moon's in Capricorn, but is this really a good time to post that video of me snorkeling? I don't know why that even came up, but the idea is you always want to look at things with a very critical eye and concern of how it will affect your career and your job and your reputation. And then from there we move into the 11th sign of the zodiac, which is, anybody know? Aquarius. So Aquarius is kind of a fun energy too. So Aquarius is kind of, I like to think of Aquarius as like the mad scientist, if you will, of the zodiac, because it's very much interested in observation, and it's very much interested in looking at things from a humanitarian perspective. But the thing about this kind of energy is it's almost an opposition of the moon in some respects, not totally, but in some respects, because the moon's really very much about emotion, and it's very much about reflection and looking at things from a different perspective, whereas Aquarius is very intellectual. Aquarius wants to categorize and label and look at things and sort of understand them from a scientific perspective in some ways. I mean, this is, of course, some general things, but you have to understand that Aquarius energy is also very humanitarian. So this is the time when some of us feel inclined towards, like, say, involving ourselves in our favorite charities, or, it's a good time to also use this energy if you're like working with groups or friends or things like that, because you'll be able to sort of look at things from the perspective of how will my actions or the actions of this group of people I'm with affect, the entire world. It's a very, like I said, it's a very expansive humanitarian energy. And what's interesting about this too is also Aquarius is very good for innovation. So sometimes you might start to feel like all these ideas are just popping into your head like crazy. So check your calendar, see if the moon's in Aquarius. And then last but not least, we have Pisces. And Pisces energy and the moon energy can sometimes be emotionally draining and intense. It's like we really tend to just get into our emotions, because Pisces is a very it is a water sign, and it's a very emotional sign, and it's a very intuitive sign as well. So this is a time that is often, depending on how what else is going on in the cosmos, but this is a great time to kind of work with your psychics or to work with your own intuition. This is a great time to either give or receive a reading. And that's, of course, assuming it's not been negatively aspected by other planets at that time. But what Pisces really likes is it likes the unseen. It likes the depths of things. And it's very spiritual, and it's all about that dreaming energy. And, again, working with the moon, you'll feel more inclined towards these things. You'll feel more attracted to these things. So my advice is take note and see how you're feeling. And if you have a calendar, if you have an app or something like that you can check the moon sign in, or hopefully if I've had time, I've shared that with you, then you'll kind of see how the energy does influence us. And it's really, I find that it's very fascinating. And it's also sort of impacted by the phase of the moon. So while the moon is traveling through the zodiac, through that wheel in the sky, it's also going through its own phases. And this is where we'll talk a little bit about aspecting. So as an astrologer, one of the things we look at is not just, where's the moon, where's the sun, where's this, the sun's in the sky, not just where the planets are, but also how they interact with each other. So that's where we get into aspects. So there's aspects that we consider to be positive from the standpoint that they work well together. That energy commingles or cooperates in a way that is helpful to us human beings. And then we have aspects that are considered sort of negative, or, to some extent they can either enhance or decrease energies in a not so fun way. And when we're talking about, you'll notice that, sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. When you're talking about how the moon aspects, different planets in the zodiac, or in our astrology. Not doing English so good today. Then we have things like what we call trines, which are little triangles, and then we have squares, and we have sextiles, semi-sextiles, you know, all of these different aspects. And again, that's sort of how the planets are interacting with each other, either in a harmonious or a disharmonious way. So you'll notice sometimes I'll put up these little posts and I'll give you, like, on, you know, August the 17th or something like that, the moon will be trine Venus, for example. And if the moon is trine Venus, I'll tell you that this is a perfect time to sort of, you know, socialize with your friends and family, because you'll be more charming and more interesting, and, you know, people will be more attracted to you. So we can really use this energy in a cooperative way with our own goals. So when you look at, you know, how the aspects are playing with the moon and the other planets, I always think of it like this. It's kind of like if I go to a party and I'm hanging out with my friends, you know, you've always got that one friend that, like, you know, always gets the party started. They're fun to hang out with. And then you got the other friend that's sort of sitting in the corner, just staring at the wall, not really talking to anybody, and is kind of shy. And then you got another friend that is the one that might start a fight. Enough alcohol in them, they'll definitely start a fight. So that's kind of how the planets are in a way. If you were to sort of endow them with personality, you would then see that once, like, if you get the guy that doesn't really want to interact with people at the party, and then you get the guy that wants to fight with everybody at the party, you can see how that's not going to go down very well. So when we're talking about how the aspects sort of affect us, that's what we're talking about, is how these planets are interacting, and what influence then that they will share with us as human beings. And you'll notice that sometimes when we have, you know, difficult aspects happening in the zodiac, then you'll just notice it around you. Everybody's like not getting along, or you're late to everything that you're trying to get to. Or our personal favorite, we talked about retrogrades a whole lot this year because there's been a heck of a lot of retrogrades. Even when those planets are in retrograde, they're still aspecting other planets. And sometimes we can feel those influences even more intensely than at other times. And so that's why it's kind of important to pay attention to this. So it's not just that the moon is currently in Capricorn. The moon's in Capricorn, but how's it getting along with Mars? If it's squaring Mars, then you know that you're not going to feel like necessarily getting work done. You're going to feel like working on punching somebody out. You know, so, but there again, you know, this is broad, because what we really want to look at, if we really want to know what's going on with you, we want to look at how all of these influences, all these planetary energies sort of affect you as an individual. And that's where it's important to have your natal chart done. And when you have your natal chart done, then you can see where all the planets were at the time of your first breath, hopefully. And that's what we do, is we take a snapshot of the sky, and then we look at where everything was in the heavens at that timing. And when we're trying to figure out, you know, why am I feeling a certain way today, what we're doing is we're actually looking at your personal natal chart, and we're comparing it against what we call a transit chart. And what a transit chart is it is, again, another snapshot of let's say 9:36 p.m. Eastern Time in Hillsburg, Ontario, Canada. And so as an astrologer, that's the information I would use to look at the transiting planets, like where's everything at right at this very moment. Now, I can't do that because right at this moment, because I'm not able to just do that in my head. It usually requires a computer program and or hours and hours of math. I can tell you, if my computer will boot this up here, I can tell you actually what the transits are for the moment. So for right now, the moon's in 29 degrees 22 degrees Capricorn. So that means it's most of the way through the sign of Capricorn, and pretty soon by tomorrow we'll be into the sign of Aquarius. And so, or Aquarius. And so that will start to now change the energy that we're experiencing. So we're going to go from, for example, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do a bunch of work today and get things done, into like, let's just think about things for a while. Let's go out with some friends and observe. So to kind of talk a little bit about the moon in Capricorn, it helps us to, that's what we're currently in and we're moving out of. It helps us to feel secure and structured. And it makes you want to work hard. Now, if we're going to look at, I'm going to see if I can find you guys an aspect just to give you an example of how we experience aspects. So right now the moon is, let's see here. Moon is trine, oh, it's not really doing anything right now. Well, it's not really doing anything with a planet. It is trine, oops, sorry. And Ceres, which is a asteroid, but that's not going to help us. Let me see if I can find something else for you. I'll give you an example of an aspect here as soon as I can find you one that we're currently experiencing. So just bear with me for a second if you can. If you don't want to, I don't blame you. So let's see here. It's really interesting because the more you start to look at how things are aspecting, then you'll start to have a deeper understanding of just the currents and undercurrents of energy that you are currently experiencing. So, okay, here's one for you. So we have Mars square Uranus. What does that mean? So we know Mars is rules Aries. And we know that Uranus is that planet that rules, in part, it rules Aquarius. And Uranus is known as being very kind of surprise-oriented, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So when we have a square is kind of like a conflicting energy. It's when, you know, not everybody's playing nice. So when Mars squares Uranus, you'll feel the need to get an enormous energy level under some kind of a control. So you might be feeling a little bit like, how to put this? I don't know if you guys have ever had that feeling like you're a hamster in a hamster wheel. Like you're just running and you're trying to get somewhere, but you're not really getting anywhere. That's kind of what this energy is like, in some respects. So if you can take that energy and shift it, and this is why I always put these aspects up for you when I do my moon updates, is trying to give you an opportunity to see how you can shift that energy. So if you know that you're kind of feeling that hamster wheel energy, then the advice would be to take that Mars square Uranus and turn it into a positive thing, which would be getting that energy under control and really focusing it and using it sort of in a leadership role. You might be wondering how that is. I don't know. It just depends on how you can apply that in your life. So your level of courage might be increased, or you might feel that you can be a little bit more specialized in how you're directing your thought processes and your energy. You might be feeling a little bit more inventive about how maybe you have something that you have to confront, but going toward it in your normal way might not be the best for you. So if you use that Mars confronting Uranus energy, which is innovation, then you can sort of change that from being a really negative experience into being a more positive one. So there's a lot of different ways that aspects work in our lives. I'm going to see if I can find you guys a moon aspect we can talk about. So the moon is in conjunction, here's one for you, is also in conjunction with Mars currently, right now as we speak. So what that means is you might be feeling a little bit impulsive. And you might be feeling a little bit emotional, maybe a little more so than usual. Although that doesn't mean necessarily you're feeling like super sensitive, but it might be that you're, not terribly sensitive to the feelings of others. Now, of course, nobody's perfect. So, I mean, I'm not implying that we're like this all the time, but, when the moon is in conjunction with Mars, this can sort of be some of the tendencies we have. So how that might play out is if you are somebody who's more of a leader as opposed to a follower, you might be kind of like barking orders, which is not terribly sensitive to other people's needs. But it's effective, no? But anyways, so that's kind of some examples of some aspects that we're currently experiencing right here, right now. Now, again, if you want to know more about how the current transits are affecting you as an individual, then you would want to have your personal natal chart done and then progressed to today or whatever day it was that you were wanting to know more about, which also counts a lot for when we're choosing dates. So like, let's say you have a special occasion coming up. So there's a branch of astrology called Electoral Astrology, and this is when we take a look at certain days or dates that we want to have an event, let's say, on. So sometimes people will choose a date for when they're opening a business or when they are preparing to break ground for, let's say, some sort of a location, or they want to plan their wedding, or, you know, any number of events or occasions. We use that branch of astrology to look at the dates in question and see what kind of transits are going on. So, for example, let's say you're getting married and you're like, okay, we know we're getting married in like July, maybe, you know, August, but we're not sure what day to pick. So then you would sit down with an astrologer and say, hey, these are the dates we're looking at. What, you know, dates do you suggest? And so as an astrologer, we would sit down and I would take the information from you. That would be your birth date and let's say your bride or groom's birth date. And I would, you know, plug it in and kind of what we call progress the chart to the specific day that you're wanting to know what the astrology looks like about that day. And then, you know, once we had that date in front of us, we could look at it and be like, okay, today's an awesome day for this. Between the hours of 3 and 5 are your best bet. That's the time when certain aspects or certain planets are in a positive aspect for you. So, you know, it's wildly useful. You would be amazed about all the different ways you can use this information to sort of positively, you know, direct your life. I mean, some of you might be familiar with the fact that like a lot of world leaders have used astrology throughout history, going back to like, what is her name? Queen Elizabeth I. She used John Dee as her personal astrologer, and he did a lot of other things too, but you know, she used astrology extensively, as does I think it was Ronald Reagan, actually Ronald Reagan's wife, Nancy Reagan. She used to use an astrologer for many, many, many things. I mean, there was at one point rumors about how they wouldn't do anything without consulting their astrologer, which I believe was Jean Dixon. Check that out. It's really kind of interesting. So this is something that is very useful in a number of different ways, more than just getting to know yourself in a more holistic way, but also, you know, ways that you can actively and consciously improve your life. And it's endlessly fascinating and entertaining. You'll find out a lot of things about yourself as an individual if you're just interested in having a birth chart done, or as we call it, a natal chart. And in that you will find many things, including, you know, what areas of life you would best be suited for in terms of a career, or, you know, kind of what your relationship is with money, or what your relationship is with relationships, and sort of why things are the way they are. So I'm going to keep this short, guys. I do appreciate those of you who've had a chance to sit with me and watch, and because you've been so kind and spent some time with me, I'd like to let you know that I'm offering a discount from today until September 1st. I'm giving a 5% off of a birth chart for any of you that are interested. I'll be sharing a little link in the comments for it, and all you'll have to do is just use the discount code on the website, and you'll be given your 5% off of your birth chart. And it's just so you know what that looks like. It would be delivered to you in a PDF. and it will be fully interpreted from stem to stern. So everything from your north node, your south node, your part of fortune, which tells you about where would you find your fortune. It's probably not in the couch, just saying. And all kinds of things about, you know, your just every area of your life, starting from your first house, which is your identity, ending up in your 12th house, which is the house of drawn shades. And it tells you sort of about that secret internal world that Pisces rules. So if you're interested in that, then just look in the comments below and you'll find a little advert, or, well, that's not the right word, a little photo picture thing. Yeah, so that's the words that I'm using for that today with the discount code. So again, thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope this was somewhat informative for you, and if nothing else, maybe a little bit entertaining. And I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, night, or whenever you're watching this. And we'll see you soon.